Hey everyone, it's Jamie Joe right here at Madlit Musings in the middle of a hot summer, sitting down to chat with award-winning Amanda Cox. Hey Amanda.
Hi, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Oh, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us because I know that you are on deadlines and books are releasing and life is always chaotic in the summertime too. So that's always a
Yeah.
trip. Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, kids are home and they want to do things.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it time for school yet? I am one of
Yeah.
those moms.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so, but you have a book coming out
Yeah.
in August. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited about this book.
Yeah, it's a neat book. The cover is really intriguing because it's not it's different. It's just a different
It
style.
is.
I don't know how to describe it. It's not like the typical photographic. It's more atmospheric, but in an artistic sort of way.
Yeah, they surprised me with that one. You kind of have like a picture like, hi, this is what I think they might come up with. And that was like completely not that. And I'm like, but I love it.
I know, and it fits. It fits the title. The title is between the sound and sea, and then the book is for people who aren't able to see a book. It's in hues of blue, but it's more of a line art, I guess. Is how I would describe it. I don't know. I'm a cover person, so I'm always like looking at the design.
Yeah, I think my books are supposed to, I've been following the tracking information. I think my author copies are supposed to actually come probably while we're talking. Um,
Oh, fun.
so I'm so excited to like hold it and actually look at
Right,
it.
right. Who was I talking to? Oh, I was talking to Carrie Taransky yesterday, and her book isn't coming out until I think September. And while we're recording these, this is the middle of July for people who are wondering. Um, and so Carrie holds up a spiral bound copy of her book, and I'm like, no fair. How? How? And she goes, this was from Vistaprint. It's just a paper notebook. It's just like a spiral bound notebook, but she put her cover graphic for the cover
I
of this
love
thing.
it.
I'm like, that's genius. I love it.
So fun.
Just makes you feel like you're holding your book when you still don't have
Yes.
it. So, all right. So, talk to us. Tell us about this novel that's coming out that we know is going to be good because you're Amanda Cox.
So it's a story about this young woman who lives in this small town in Tennessee, and her life has kind of gotten messed up by like small town scandal rumors that her family's kind of gotten tangled up to by no fault of their own, but sometimes stories kind of spiral out of control, and it's really just sort of messed up her life. And it's been so bad actually that her parents have moved out of the town. And her business is struggling because of it. And so she's like at this point where she had an idea of how she wanted her life to go, but it hasn't gone that way. And she just needs to get out of town for a while. And her friend convinces her to do this crazy thing and take this job to be a project manager for a decommissioned lighthouse on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. She grew up, her dad was in construction. So she was like, oh, yeah, I can do this. And I can get out of here for a few months, figure my life out while I'm doing this job, and then I can come back. And so she decides to go for it, gets out there, and it is just not the experience that she expected. She's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. She kind of falls in instant adoration with this elderly gentleman named Walt. He's purchased this lighthouse and wants to restore it as a way to honor a childhood friend that he lost unexpectedly under not so great circumstances. Didn't part well, and so he really wants to restore this lighthouse as a way to kind of honor her or just kind of restore something that like he's got a lot of regrets and he's trying to find a way to kind of make up for it in some way. And
Yeah.
so she's trying to help him do this. And as she's working on this lighthouse, there are things that just constantly go wrong. This area is steeped in like folklore and ghost stories and things like that. So of course everybody's like the ghosts of the last
I love
lightkeeper.
it.
They're like, that's why it's happening. She's like, I don't believe in ghosts. And anyway, so things are happening. She
Yeah.
finds notes tucked into the walls of the lighthouse that were written by a woman lighthouse keeper, and she's really excited about it and goes to research it, but she can't find anybody by that name. And
Okay.
so as she's kind of like digging into this history, she's trying to figure out if this is somehow connected to the last light keeper and his daughter, or how these different things are intertwined. At the same time, trying to piece together the story of what really happened to Walt's friend, to try to give him some closure, because she was like, I can restore this lighthouse, but I can't fix this. Like, this is
Oh yeah.
beyond,
Yeah.
what he really needs is beyond what I can do. And so she's hoping that she can kind of piece together, then and in the process sort of figure out her own life. So there's a lot of different little threads going on in the
Oh,
story.
it sounds so good. I mean, first of all, a lighthouse story. Who doesn't love a lighthouse story? I'm not
Yeah,
sure I met anybody who's like, ew, lighthouses. No.
I know, right?
It's not typically the reaction that you get from people when you mention a lighthouse, but that's exciting. So you have a little bit of everything in this, really.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, and it all kind of started because I'd run several years ago run across an article that was talking about like the World War II history
Okay.
in the Outer Banks, that I just didn't know. I was like, what? I did not learn that, ships were being bombed off the eastern coast of the US, like 7 miles
Right.
out. And I'm like, that's crazy. And so it was one of those things I sort of tucked back. So my character, Walt, he grew up during that time period.
Okay.
Um, so he's got some memories, and those childhood memories are kind of intertwined to some of that history. And so I got to kind of pull some of that in, and just pulling to in like the folklore and the ghost stories that are really prevalent in that area. It was
Yeah.
fun to kind of weave that in a little bit. I mean, they're not spooky, like, it doesn't have like the spooky, eerie vibe that you've got going on in some of your books.
It's not a
But
ghost story novel. It's just a novel that touches on legends.
yeah. So just fun because I had a lot of fun like reading some of like the legends and the ghost stories that
Oh yeah.
are kind of passed down in the area. So then I'm writing a fictional island in the area. I'm like, it's gotta have its own ghost stories and legends and myths and
Right.
things.
Right. Well, I think that's part of the lore of Lighthouse. And then a lot of those regions are just old. I mean, they're
Yeah.
American old. It's probably some of the older regions in the United States. So, as far as the European immigrants are
Oh yeah.
concerned.
The last time that I took a trip recently to that
Okay.
area, and we got to stay on Ocracoke, where part of the story is set. And while we were wandering around, we see this house, and it says antique store. So
Okay.
we walked inside, and there's a man's voice like coming through with that like authentic Outer Banks accent that
Mm,
like you can only hear in that part of
yeah.
the country. And he's like, "Hey, this is my house. It's also I live here. Also, this is my antique store." And so we go in and we meet this man named Chester, and he's got like this whole trunk that is like full of like authenticated Blackbeard treasure, things from like
What?
Israel, like all kinds of stuff. But his family has been living in that area since the 1600s. And
Wow.
he has lit like just, and he still lives in the area like all these generations later. So it was really cool to meet him.
That is so phenomenal. That's when history sort of like reaches out from the past and you can
Yeah.
almost feel it enter the room, like not in a
Yeah.
ghost-like sense, but just like it's just really alive.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very cool.
That is so cool. And he has actual authenticated Blackbeard treasure.
Oh yeah, he definitely is. He's like the stuff in the cabinet is not for sale, but I will tell you all about it. And it's so funny because if you stand there long enough, just walking through his house, like new people will come in and he'll tell his whole spiel again about like where he found it and how he got it authenticated and all the different authenticators. And so
That is
it's
awesome.
really fun.
He's definitely proud of that, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I guess I would
Oh,
be.
I would be. I would be. In fact, if I went there, I'm not sure I'd ever leave that spot. I'd just sit and stare at it all day long, like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, gosh. I mean, Blackbeard's his own story in and of itself, so we won't necessarily go off on that segue, but anything pirates, lighthouses, ocean, East Coast, you got me. I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Okay, so Walt is so he's the owner of the lighthouse,
Yes.
correct? And then your heroine, I'm sorry, I forgot her name,
Joey. I don't
Joey.
even know if I said her name. Her name
I'm
is
not sure.
Josephina, but she goes by
Okay.
Joey.
So Joey, is she hired by Walt then to restore the lighthouse?
Well, it's kind of like this interesting dynamic that is
Okay.
going on because Walt does own the lighthouse, but he's 80 years old. His
Hmm.
wife has passed away, and he's always been very, very like responsible with everything that he's always done. He's always cared for everyone. But now that he's passed away, he's taken his life savings and her life insurance and he's spent it. Um, getting this lighthouse and this boat. And so his grandson, whom he raised, is kind of like, okay, fine, I can be okay with this, but you have to let me kind of oversee kind of what's
Ah,
going wrong. So
okay.
when Joey shows up, in the Outer Banks, she kind of
Mhm.
suddenly discovers she has two bosses, and she's like, "Wait, which one of you do I actually answer to?"
Right.
So it's kind of some funny dynamics between the three of them.
Oh, I can imagine. I can
Yeah,
imagine. My
because
dad's in
Walt is
his
like,
early 80s, and men in their early 80s are quite the characters. They don't really care if they offend anybody anymore. Like, there's no I mean, they can't have any more regrets than they already do. So they're like,
right. That's
throw
very much
caution to the
Walt. He's like, I am living my life and I'm doing what I want to do, and it's fine. Like, I do not need you trying to babysit me and take care of me.
I
Um, but
love him already.
but yeah, his grandson is concerned because he's kind of like, this is not the person that I always knew. Is
Yeah,
like, are you okay? Like he's trying to, I mean, he kind of is a pain sometimes, but he genuinely is concerned and
yeah,
is trying to figure out like what is going on, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Oh, that's super fun. Now, is there a little bit of romantic element between Finn and Joey, or is that just not a focus?
That was something that I really hadn't planned on when I was originally writing
Mhm.
this story. He was just going to be kind of like this annoying, crusty character who butts into what her and Walt's like plan together.
Right.
But it kind of, yeah, did develop into a relationship with them, and I had a lot of fun with it because, so I would say this book has a little more romance, have more of a romance thread in
Okay.
it than some of my other previous books. So it
Right.
was fun to kind of
Yeah.
like weave that element into it, and their differing personalities and.
That's cool. That's cool. So yeah, I wasn't sure. Like I know some readers who may not have read your books. You're not technically a romance author. So I was just curious if there was a little romance built in or not, because we never know with Amanda Cox.
I try to keep people on their toes and just throw some, different things in every time.
Yeah,
So
here, have a romance. Here, have a ghost. Here, have a lighthouse.
exactly. I just had way too much fun with this one.
Oh,
But yeah,
that's
I do
awesome.
have there are so it's present day, but there's a
Hmm.
lot of history woven into it and like
Okay.
old stories that Walt tells. So it's like takes place in the present, but there's like letters and things like that. So you have like the present day relationship with Finn and Joey, and then you also have a little bit of like Walt and his friend,
Okay.
because she was in love with the lighthouse and he was a little bit in love with her. So
Oh.
it's
And
got a
this
little fun.
friend, she's the one that he has regrets about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I won't ask too many questions about that because we don't want to spoil everything, but
It's so hard to like figure like I'm like, wait, is that a
yes,
I don't know.
I know. I know. People are
It's so
like, people are
familiar to me. Like I know like
right.
all the ins and outs. So I'm like, wait, is that a surprise or is that like
Yeah.
everybody gets that when they
Yeah, exactly. Am I stealing from the reader or can I say this out loud? That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so you do have in all of your books, you definitely have thought-provoking threads that you weave through. So your stories are obviously entertaining and have won lots of awards and very well written. But there's always something that the reader's kind of going on a emotional and spiritual journey with the characters. So take us a little bit there. Where are we going to go when we read this book?
So this book deals a lot with past regrets,
Mhm.
and how to handle those. That's definitely something that I think all of us as human beings, if we've been on the earth for any amount of time, we wrestle with that feeling, whether we're like no regrets and we like shove them all away and pretend they don't exist, or
Mhm.
whether we are so focused on our regrets that we kind of stay in a cycle of reliving things. And so each of the characters have different things that they regret that they wish that they had done differently, and so it's a lot about working through some of those things and how do we handle regret in a healthy way that helps us move forward to a place of like growth, as opposed to either being stuck or pretending, boxing it away and pretending that it's not
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, dealing with regrets and second chances. I would say
Mhm.
all of these characters deal with a lot of opportunities um, that come in unexpected packages for them to feel a sense of like restoration and that second chance that they're kind of looking for. So for some of them, it doesn't happen the way, like if they could dream up what their second chance looked like, it's not necessarily that. But it
Gotcha.
is an opportunity for
Hmm.
some healing and some growth to come through some new opportunities that kind of come their way.
Yeah. That's the thing with regret too, is because you can kind of, I'm just thinking out loud, but you can kind of look at regret two different ways. Like you can wallow in it and never come out. Or if you're wanting to come out, then so often we have a specific trajectory that we expect our healing to come from. And God doesn't necessarily take us in that path,
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, wait, that's not what I thought it was going to be. So what made you want to deal with regret? Because regret's kind of a big topic to put in a story, but yet it's neat how you can layer it with different stories within a story.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I trying to because sometimes themes like you kind of have one in mind before you
Yeah.
start, and then there's one that kind of emerges. And I think this one was one that sort of emerged as I
Okay.
was writing and just thinking about because that is such a motivator for my character Walt and why he's doing
Mm,
what he's doing. And so it just got me to thinking about how that's such a universal kind of emotion that we kind of wrestle
yeah.
with the idea of like regret and what to do with it. And what we do mentally, like how, because when we regret something, we have this way of like looking back on something with 2020 vision that we did not
Hmm.
have before. And then we recreate a scenario in which either we're trying to recreate it no matter how we think it should have gone, or we're trying to take it and create a whole like new like, oh, this is if I had only done this or if I had only done that, then this wouldn't
Hmm.
have been my outcome,
Hmm.
instead of finding a way to make peace with actually what is and how to move forward with that. And so um, it was interesting as I was working because it was one of those stories that I didn't necessarily know how I was going to end it through
Yeah.
a good deal of the writing of it. I was like, okay, well, it could end this way or this way. And I had like all these different paths that I was like potentially going to take the story.
Yeah.
And so it kind of like played into the idea of like, what is the journey that I want to take this character on?
Mm,
I don't necessarily want to give this character like a neat tied up bow of
right.
like dealing with regret because life just isn't like that sometimes. But I
Mm-mm.
also wanted to leave it in a place that had some hope. That we're not left sad and wallowing in regrets, but hopeful that
Yeah.
as we process those, that there are beautiful things that can come out of even the things we kind of want to push away and say, oh, let's pretend that never happened.
Hmm.
What are some beautiful things that could potentially come out of that if we process it in a healthy way?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you look at scripture, even in all the stories in the Old Testament, and how much really regret weaves its way through a human process between the relationship between them and God, and how God can bring, to use the cliche, beauty from ashes. But it's kind of a different kind of beauty. It's not necessarily what it was
Right.
originally intended to be.
Yeah. And so, yeah, sometimes redemption is kind of messy.
It is. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was interesting kind of exploring that with these characters.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's really cool. I'm glad that you went there. I think a lot of people will relate to that struggle and how to process and what to do with regret. So, um, okay. So I have to ask, you mentioned the World War II and that Walt grew up in that area during World War II. So is there some elements of World War II that we're also going to see in this book, or is that just happenstance because of when he was born?
And there are some things that are brought into kind of the backstory about what really happened
Yeah.
with the last lightkeeper and his daughter, because they disappeared during the time a ship was torpedoed off the coast. And there's a lot, some of the rumors are like, oh, maybe they were in cahoot, like the things that happened that led to
Okay.
that ship.
Okay.
Like maybe they were like spies for the Germans. And then other people like, no, of course they weren't. The Germans came and they were the ones who like, did something to them. So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of plays into some of like the history
Okay.
in that way. And, Walt talks about some of his memories from that time
Mm-hmm.
period and some choices that he made as a young man in relation to what was going on in the country during that time period. So that kind of gets
Yeah.
pulled in a little bit.
Yeah. So anybody who is interested in World War II will probably enjoy this book to a degree as well, even though that's not its central focus, but little touches of
Right.
it here and there. Yeah. That's cool. No, I agree with you. I was surprised. I think it was a couple of years ago. I was talking to Kara Putman, who had done a novella collection that had some of the East Coast insurgents from Germany. And I was like, wait, what? No.
It's so wild.
It was like literally just off our shores.
Yeah. And nobody like knew about it
No,
because
no. Everybody's like,
or they
la di
weren't
da.
supposed to talk. Yeah. We're supposed to talk about it, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
if you talk to like when I was talking to Chester and different
Hmm.
people when I was in Ocracoke, they obviously there it's not their stories, but like
Right.
stories of grandparents and things like that. They're like, oh yeah, there were German soldiers who came to the movie theater, and like, oh yeah, there was German soldiers who stole people's chickens, and like all of it is kind of like it was really fun researching like the backstory to try to make
Wow.
sure it was accurate because there's so many stories and you're like, wait, like is this a real story or is this a story that's grown into something else? Because it just really wasn't recorded very much. A
No.
lot of it is just people's stories that
Oh
got passed
man.
down.
So we were technically invaded by Germany and they just took our chickens.
Apparently, it can the military will neither confirm nor
Or
deny
deny.
the presence of Germans and
Yeah.
stolen chickens, but
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
people, there were locals who said it happened. So
I would believe it because it's so funny. You hear stories from locals, no matter what region you go, and some of them are so off the wall that I'm like, if I were to write that for my publisher, they would say no, that would never happen. And yet
yeah,
those are the things that happen.
yeah, truth is stranger than fiction
It
a lot of
is.
times.
It really is. I wonder how many German families have little movie theater ticket stubs that their great grandfathers or grandfathers brought back from the US.
Be like, yeah,
This is my
well,
souvenir of invading the United States.
I came to watch a movie. It was great.
It was the best invasion ever. No casualties. Except the movie wasn't that great, but and
Right.
the chicken was the casualty potentially. So,
Yeah, yeah.
oh man. Okay, so the book is called Between the Sound and Sea, and it releases August 6th. And I'm assuming readers can get this novel at any of the primary places they can purchase books.
Yep,
All right,
anywhere their favorite retailer, go find them.
go find it. And then if they want to learn more about Amanda Cox, follow your journey and your writing journey, etc., what's the best way to do that?
You can follow me on my website, which is amandacoxwrites.com. That's where you can find like my newsletter. Usually I'll be updating with all the inside information there first. But then I'm on Facebook and Instagram quite a bit. Amanda Cox Writes. If you type that in the search bar, you'll find me there too.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, Amanda, I'm looking forward to this book. I think it's going to be a blast. That's so many themes and so many concepts stuffed into one novel that only you could pull off. So kudos to you. You got it all in this
I,
one.
I always got to pack it in there.
And you do such a good job of it. I don't think anyone's
Well,
complaining.
thank you.
So, well, thanks for being with us today. And readers, make sure you go out and get Between the Sound and Sea.
Thanks so much, Jamie.